Okay, so today we're going to go over making some baby back ribs, okay? So the first thing I did was I just, took a slab of baby back ribs, I washed it off, and I dried it off too, okay? So the first thing you want to do is you want to take it and you want to trim off any excess meat that you're not going to use. So for example, you'll see over here, the most important thing is, you see how the thickness of the ribs? You want it to be pretty even. Now this one's pretty good actually, it's not too bad. So the only thing I'm going to do is, over here you'll see there's basically a flap of extra meat right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that off. Okay? Don't need that. Then over here you're going to see this end piece. There's not really a whole lot of meat on this bone, so there's kind of no point in me keeping it around. So I'm just going to trim that off. Okay? So now you see this first rib has a good amount of meat on both sides, so that's going to be a good piece of meat. Okay? Now on the other side you'll see, okay, right here it's pretty thin when it comes to the meat that's on the bone, but on this side of the meat you'll notice that there's kind of like a hump of meat right here. You also notice there's a good amount of fat here, and there's actually some good connective tissues down there. So what I want to do is I actually want to slice some of this meat off. I'm going to trim it, and as you trim, I'm not taking off a whole lot, I'm just taking off like a thin layer, maybe like half an inch or so, but you'll see that there's actually a lot of fat in here, and there's also some connective tissue. So by trimming this off, yes, I'm wasting a little bit of meat, but the whole point of this is I want the meat to cook evenly. So by trimming it away, now you'll notice that, okay, if I hold this meat up, the thickness is now more even. Okay. Okay. Now on this side of the meat, there's not really a whole lot of meat over here, it's mostly bone. So I'm just going to add a little bit, okay? And then I'm going to rub over the meat. Okay? Then I'm going to flip it over. Now on this side, I want to put a little bit more because I want it to actually come in contact with the meat, okay? All over. You don't really need to rub it in, but you do need to pack it down a little bit so that it sticks to the meat. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to basically fold it in half, like this. Okay? Make kind of like a mohawk, okay, like that. And then what you want to do is you just want to fold it over again, just like that. Okay, you want it to be loose because you want there to be enough room for the steam to build up. You don't want to like push it against the meat. Okay. Now on one side you're going to actually crimple it up like this and fold it over. Okay, like roll it up. That way when you add liquid to it, the liquid's not going to come out. Okay. On this side now you're technically going to do the same thing tomorrow, but not until after you add the liquid. Therefore, on this side, I'm just going to push, I'm going to make sure that the opening is still there, okay, see the opening? Now I'm going to push it down, and I'm just going to fold it over. That way tomorrow I can open it back up and add the liquid, okay? Do the same thing on this side. Put the meat in the middle, okay, fold it over, put it down. Fold that over, and then this side I'm just going to fold it over so I can open it again tomorrow, okay? Now these two I'm going to put it in the fridge. I'm going to let it sit there and let the flavor seep into the meat overnight. Technically you can leave it as short as like 4 to 6 hours, but I recommend doing it overnight. Then tomorrow, like I said, we're going to make a vinaigrette based liquid. We're going to add a little bit of liquid to each of the pouches, just enough so that when you put it in the oven and bake it, it's going to keep the meat moist and braise it. Because if you baked it without that, it would dry up and you would have a tough piece of baby back rib instead of something that's like, watery and falling off the bone. Okay, so tomorrow we'll check back on these and we'll add the liquid to it. Okay, so I've been letting the ribs sit, in the dry rub overnight in the refrigerator now. So now today we're ready to make the sauce that's going to go into the ribs, okay? Now the sauce is basically going to braise the ribs while it's cooking. So what I like to do is I like to use these ingredients for my sauce. Is the main ingredient is going to be the vinegar, okay? And then what the vinegar does is it helps to counteract the sweetness of all the brown sugar that we added there. So let's start with that. Well, the tomato base, you can technically use just tomato paste if you want, but then, you know, just add a little bit more sweetness to it. So, okay, I'm going to use maybe about half a cup right there, give or take. I'm going to add, you know, a little bit more of the vinegar. Okay, that looks about right to me. Now I want to add some Worcestershire sauce. Some honey. The Worcestershire sauce is really just for the additional, you know, onion and garlic flavor that I want to add. It also adds a little bit more of that tartness to it. And then the honey is mainly just to counteract some of the sourness with the more sweetness. But I wanted a different sweetness flavor than the brown sugar, so that's why I choose honey. Okay. Now I'm going to add just a little bit more of the actual spices. Okay, so again, that Cajun seasoning and the Western seasoning, or, you know, if you're using chili powder, then just use some more chili powder. Now I'm going to whisk it around for a little bit. Give it a taste. Tastes pretty good. Now this sauce, it should taste like barbecue sauce, but it's going to be a lot more sour than it normally would be because, again, you put a lot of vinegar in there. What's going to counteract this sourness is the brown sugar that's already on these ribs, okay? So the next thing I want to do now is I want to open the pouches, okay? Remember yesterday, we're just folding it and opening it back up. So now I have access to the meat, okay? Now I'm going to pour in, you know, roughly half of the liquid into each. Okay, that's going to be about enough. And, you know, I have a little bit extra in case I have more ribs, okay? Again, that's the price for not measuring. So now I just want to lean these back, let the liquids drip all the way into the meat. Now, if you remember when I put the ribs in here yesterday, I put them so that the meat is facing up and the bone is facing down, okay? What that does is it creates a little, you know, it basically puts the ribs so that they're not sitting in the liquid now. Now the liquid's at the bottom, the ribs kind of sit on top of it, so that, you know, it allows it to steep and steam inside of the sauce. If you were to flip it around the other way, now you're going to have the meat in direct contact with the liquid sitting in there, and it's going to almost like boil in the liquid as opposed to, you know, braising. So I like to do it this way. I've tried it the other way and it doesn't turn out as well, okay? So now you're going to take these and you're going to put them into a preheated oven, 300 degrees. Once you put it into the oven, then you want to drop the temperature down to about 225 and let it cook for about 2.5 to 3 hours. Okay. Now this is heavy duty foil, but it does have the tendency to leak a little bit sometimes. So what I like to do is I like to put it onto a baking dish and then put it into the oven. Okay. So I'm going to put it in the oven now, and then later I'll show you guys what it looks like once, you know, it's done cooking, and then we're going to take this liquid and actually make the barbecue sauce out of it. Okay. Okay, now that the ribs are done cooking, I already opened one up just so I can take a look at it, but this is what it should look like. So real quick, be careful with the steam. Nope. Okay, and what you're looking for is, you see how the bone is now pulling away from the meat? Before, the meat was actually all the way against the bone, but now you can actually see the bone is pulling away. That's when you know it's done. Okay? If the meat is still covering the bone, you need to keep cooking it, okay? Next, what you want to do is you want to drain the liquid into a saucepan and bring it to a boil. You basically want to reduce it by roughly half. As you can see, I've already reduced it down by about an inch. Oh, no, more like a half an inch. I'm probably going to let it go, you know, maybe another ½ inch or so, just until, like, instead of being watery, it gets more like glazy, a little bit thicker. Okay. Right now I'm letting the ribs rest. As you can see, I'm actually making more than you know, one rack of ribs. I'm actually making a ton for some coworkers tomorrow. But this is a process. No matter if you're doing just you know, one rack of ribs, 2 pieces, or if you're doing, you know, 10, it doesn't matter. You want to reduce the liquid. Once you have about halfway, then you want to take, you know, a brush, something that looks about like this. And then you're basically going to take this off the fire, let it cool down a little bit. Then you're going to basically paint the glaze onto the ribs. Now over here, if you're going to serve it like this, then, you know, meaning one whole piece, then you're going to want to paint the whole thing. Okay, now once the rib is finally cooled down to touch, cutting it is pretty easy. Literally, it falls off the bone. So all you need to do is you just need to be gentle and just let the knife basically come down on the meat itself. Okay, I'm not really putting too much pressure. I'm just pushing down just a little bit, only because if you push down too much, the meat will literally fall apart, because right now it's so soft to fall off the bone. Okay, so I'm separating them individually just to make it easier for service. Okay, but literally it comes across that soft. Okay. Now, as you can see, as I drag the blade, the meat is not really stuck to the bone anymore. It wants to come off easily. So this is where the term, you know, fall off the bone comes from. Okay. So see, this bone, it won't even hold it. Okay. So I got 5 good pieces. This one I'll serve it to, you know, just without the bone. So now what you want to do is you want to cut all your ribs. If you're going to serve it individually, you want to cut them like this and let them continue to cool off. Then you're going to paint the glaze onto them, okay? Once they're back onto a cooling rack. You can also, you know, you can cut them into 2s, however you want to serve them, okay? So the first thing that I want to do is I just want to actually paint this onto the ribs. Okay? So nothing fancy, literally I'm just painting it on there. Now you don't want to drench it in too much sauce, but you do want to get enough sauce so that it does a clean single coat onto the rib. Okay? Okay, the final step in the ribs is after you put the sauce on the ribs, you need to put them in the oven for about 500 degrees, and you're only going to leave it there for a few minutes. You basically want to see, here, let me just try to zoom in real quick. You want to watch the ribs, and the sauce on the ribs, you want it to basically have it start bubbling. Once it bubbles, you want to immediately take this out of the oven and let it cool down. That's what's going to turn the sauce into more of a glaze, and it'll actually stick to the ribs. You just need to keep an eye on this. You can't walk away from it, because after the bubbling, it ends up starting to burn. So, like right now, I'm already starting to see it bubble just a little bit, so I'm going to be taking it out right now, okay?